how do we make sure that there is consistency of policy when the government keeps changing their policies so often? And we saw this yesterday happening at the cricket board.
Kalani, as I mentioned earlier in our presentation, that is where the investor protection mechanisms kick in. And that has been addressed by the Port City Special Economic Zone law. So just very quickly, just to recap, I mentioned that there are certain inbuilt mechanisms for those who come on board Port City. So for example, your agreement with the Economic Commission will state that no subsequent regime or no subsequent policy or regulation can alter the terms that have been afforded to you. So for example, if you have qualified for 20 years tax incentive, a subsequent regulation or policy or regime cannot come and reverse that and tell you you're now done. So those are the inbuilt investor mechanisms that we have at Port City.
$135th speaker who has come on these MBA diaries. We have had about 4 or 5 different ambassadors. We had people from the US, like the expert for global branding called Simon Arnold. We have had basically all the chamber heads of Sri Lanka, the top 100 CEOs on this panel, and it's actually an honor to have you on board today. So here's a lady who has a decade of experience in Sri Lanka's private and the development sector, specializing in the areas of commercial, legal, trade, and investment facilitation. She has previously held positions of CEO of the Sri Lanka Institute of Directors, SLID, Director Marketing for Deep Products PLC, which is part of the Haley's Groups, the Executive Director of the American Chamber of Commerce in Sri Lanka, and Private Sector Development Analyst for the Sri Lanka Resident Mission of the Asian Development Bank. As the Executive Director of AmCham, she was appointed to the board of the Asia Pacific Council of American Chamber of Commerce, which is comprising of 28 AmChams in the Asia Pacific region, as the Regional Vice Chair for South Asia and Central Asia. She's also a law graduate from the University of Colombo, and I was called to the bar of the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka as an attorney at law. An associate member of the Chartered Institute of Marketing, UK. She was awarded the Women Leadership Achievement Award by the World Women Leadership Congress in 2016, and the Best Performance of Sri Lanka by the Chartered Institute of Marketing in 2008. Ladies and gentlemen, it's actually an honor for me to introduce the Director Investments and Promotions and Marketing of the CHEC Port City Colombo project. We call it the Port City project. Radika Obeyesekere will be talking to us about the new Sri Lanka from the Port City project. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Radika.
Thank you, Rohantha. The honor is in fact mine. What an honor to be addressing this audience, an esteemed organization, APIT, with years of success behind the brand. You've put out you've put out a plethora of qualified graduates over the years, and the honor and the privilege is truly mine to be addressing this audience. And thank you very much, Rohantha, for the opportunity. Ruth, I think I mentioned to you earlier, am I at liberty to pose a few questions before I get into the formal presentation to the participants, and are they in a position to unmute themselves and respond? Because I'd like to make this as informal as possible. Are we able to do that?
Yes. Radika, a better option would be to just go through your presentation first,
Okay.
and they will then feed in a few questions coming in,
Right.
so that we really understand there's so much of development that I have read. And of course, when I met you, you were briefing where the port city of what was there and what
Yes.
has now begun after actually you joined. It would be great if you can share your view, and then these guys will start then shooting all the questions. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Let's do that. Okay. So I'm just going to share my screen. One second. Ladies and gentlemen, and everyone tuned in, it gives me great pleasure this evening to be speaking to you and presenting to you Sri Lanka's largest foreign direct investment to date, the Port City Colombo Development Project. I've titled my presentation, Live in Port City, Enjoy Sri Lanka, because as you would see further down in our discussion, the proposition that I would really like to put forward this evening to all of you MBA graduates tuned in, and this is going to be the next generation of Sri Lanka. The proposition that I would like to put across to you is that all those opportunities that we once went after globally will now be at your doorstep at Port City, Colombo, thereby giving you the opportunity to live in Port City and to enjoy Sri Lanka, which is our motherland. So what is Port City? What is it that we are developing here as Sri Lanka's largest foreign direct investment to date? What we are developing here is a world-class master planned city development right in the heart of Colombo, as you would see here. So Port City Colombo sits on 269 hectares of ocean reclamation and is now by law an extension of the central business district of Sri Lanka. So what does Port City Colombo, what does this master plan city development really mean for those looking to live and work within Port City? For those looking to live at Port City, what we are offering here is truly best-in-class living and residential facilities supported by social infrastructure such as the universities, the hospitals, the schools, that is really going to elevate your standard of living within Sri Lanka and Port City. So we're looking at bringing in some of the best brands internationally to put together this social infrastructure and to give you that real world-class living experience within Port City. What does Port City mean for trade and investment? What does Port City mean for those looking to operate in terms of a career out of this master plan city development? Under the Port City law, the Act of 2021, that is the Colombo Port City Economic Commission Act of 2021, the Port City development has been designated as what you call a special economic zone. I will go into a little more detail further down in my presentation on what it means to be a special economic zone. But just to give you some facts and figures on the project, the development on completion is tipped to bring in foreign direct investment amounting to approximately $15 billion, of which $1.4 billion has already been put down for the infrastructure development. So what we mean by the infrastructure development is, of course, the ocean reclamation, which is now complete. I'm sure some of you would have had the opportunity of visiting Port City. The roadways, the utilities, the park facilities, and all of that, which is now almost drawing to a close. So it's tipped to be completed later this year. All that has amounted to an investment of $1.4 billion. And what is noteworthy at this point is that the entire port city development is founded on foreign direct investment with zero debt to the government of Sri Lanka. So it is a public-private partnership between the government of Sri Lanka and CHEC Port City, which is the company that I represent, the project company. And in turn, as part of the public-private partnership, the investment made by CHEC Port City is the investment of 1.4 billion, which has been made thus far. In terms of ownership of the project, of the development, 100% ownership of Port City lies with the government of Sri Lanka. So in summary, 6 key reasons why Port City is an attractive proposition. As you would see later on, in terms of financial incentives and low cost of operations, the Port City offering comparatively to other special economic zones in the region, as well as some of the regional hubs such as Singapore and Dubai, offers significantly lower costs of operations. Needless to say, Sri Lanka and Colombo. Sri Lanka is one of the most livable countries. It has been voted as one of the most livable countries, and more so Colombo. In terms of the standard of living, it ranks pretty high in terms of in comparison to most other cities in the South Asian region. Real potential here at Port City to position itself as an international business hub. In terms of the Port City offering, we're looking at best-in-class office facilities. We're looking at retail. We will be looking to launch Sri Lanka's first downtown duty-free facility by December this year. It's going to be a first not only for Sri Lanka, but for this part of the world as well. And also in terms of residential and living facilities, again, as I mentioned, really top of the range condominium spaces. We're looking to break ground on a luxury villa project early next year. So this is going to be 91 villas, which is going to be one of the larger developments within Port City. And of course, the entertainment spaces, where Port City will be home to an integrated resort. Interestingly, the same size as Marina Bay Sands. It will sit over 15 hectares with a casino, a theme park, and also a luxury hotel. In terms of the business regime, as I mentioned earlier, Port City has been designated as what you call a special economic zone. So I will go into what that means for businesses and investors. But in summary, what Port City has set out to achieve through this special economic zone is to ensure optimal levels of ease of doing business. So the special economic zone regulatory framework, or the laws governing the Port City special economic zone, have really addressed most of the bottlenecks that we face in operating, not just in Sri Lanka, but also in the region. So there have been detailed studies that have been done prior to putting together this legal framework. And the challenges and the bottlenecks arising out of that study that were identified as part of that study have been really addressed through the Port City Special Economic Zone, thereby really ensuring that all businesses and investors who come on board have that end-to-end experience of smooth operation within the zone. And sitting as the apex body of Port City is the Colombo Port City Economic Commission. It is, in a sense, the equivalent of your BOI, and it has been tasked with really ensuring that it acts as a single window business and investment facilitator for all those looking to work and live out of Port City. And of course, ESG. ESG is very much at the heart of the entire development. It's at the core of the development. There have been multiple expressions I beg your pardon, environmental impact assessments, EIAs. We've had 3 rounds of EIAs carried out, multiple findings which have stemmed out of the EIAs, and those findings which really run across the entire development of the project, ensuring that 100% compliance is achieved at the various stages of development. And then, of course, active initiatives to ensure that we have a continuous pipeline of talent, such as yourselves, which is why it's so interesting for me to speak of Port City to this group, because I strongly believe that our talent pool here in Sri Lanka, which is really second to none in the region, is going to play a crucial role in ensuring the success of the Port City project. So this brings me to what we call the thrust sectors identified at Port City. So what this means is that following detailed studies that were carried out by the Boston Consulting Group and EY Parthenon, we identified a number of thrust sectors, so 7 to be precise, as you can see here. 7 thrust sectors which came out as having the highest potential for operating out of Port City. So the IT, ITES sectors, financial services, shipping, logistics and maritime, professional services, regional hub operations, global capability centers, as well as tourism operations, which have been identified as having the highest potential for operating out of Port City. Now, why Colombo and why Port City? So, I mean, this is ideally the pitch that we make to our foreign investors and to the global brands looking to set up at Port City. But it's important that you, being the talent pool that is going to feed into Port City, that you are aware of Sri Lanka and Port City's unique selling proposition. So what are we selling to these global brands? What are we selling to our international investors in terms of the offering? So one thing that really comes up quite strongly in Sri Lanka's favor, as you know, is our connectivity. We sit at the epicenter of the world's major trading routes, maritime routes, flight routes, as you can see, multiple flights, both short and long hauls to all the major destinations globally. So within 3 to 4 hours of flying time, you're in other regional hubs such as Singapore and Dubai, and then of course further out. What else are we offering here at Port City? We are offering ease of doing business. That is our main unique selling proposition for those looking to set up. So as I mentioned earlier, a single window system. Sitting at the center of the single window system, as I mentioned earlier, is the Port City Economic Commission. What will they do for you? So the Colombo Port City Economic Commission will really ensure that all the day-to-day operational challenges that businesses and investors otherwise face, for example, your licenses, your visas, your permissions, all of that will be taken care of by this single body, this single entity, really ensuring that foreigners coming into Sri Lanka or foreign entities coming into Sri Lanka are not going to get caught up in that standard rat race. In terms of 100% foreign ownership, we have no restrictions in terms of foreign ownership. We have no restrictions in terms of capital and profit repatriation. Port City Colombo, as a special economic zone, is what you call a foreign currency designated export of services zone. So let me just break that down for you. I know it's probably a little too much to digest. What does it mean to be foreign currency designated? So within the area of Port City, you will transact in any designated foreign currency other than the LKR. So, for example, if an Indian IT company, one of the top IT Indian companies, are looking to set up at Port City, they will bring in their capital in INR if they wish to do so. They have the option of paying their employees in INR, and they also have the facility of repatriating their profits in INR. So what the advantage here is that you cut yourself out from the costs of convertibility. So you're not going to have to convert your INR to USD, for example. And by virtue of the fact that you operate in any designated currency, so it can be the USD, it can be the Thai baht. If I'm not mistaken, the central bank has about 16 designated foreign currencies. So you're permitted to transact in any one of those currencies. You also technically cut yourself out from the volatility of dealing with the LKR. So you're not compelled to pay your employees in LKR. And then, of course, the fiscal incentives that are available under the Port City Special Economic Zone. So we just recently received parliamentary nod for tax incentives for up to 25 years. Of course, subject to meeting the eligibility criteria, as well as the ability to pay your employees in foreign currency, and then employees will be eligible for the 0% income tax on their remuneration. What else is on offer to ensure this ease of doing business operation? We have a dedicated international dispute resolution. So for those of you who are involved with companies or even in private matters, I really don't have to tell you what some of the challenges of dealing with our local judicial system are. So to address that challenge, we will have our dedicated dispute resolution center for Port City, thereby really making the decision-making process a lot faster and more efficient. So we are in talks with a leading dispute resolution entity, a globally renowned entity, and they will be coming on board to operate out of Port City. And then, of course, liberal labor laws. We're looking at exemptions from the termination of employment of Workmen's Act. So that makes the termination process slightly easier. For those of you who are familiar with our labor laws, our labor laws are pretty archaic in that area. So while the hiring process is a lot easier, the termination of employment process is quite stringent. So all of that is going to be addressed under the Port City Special Economic Zone and the Port City Act of 2021. Right, so incentives for investors. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking at fiscal incentives. As you can see here, very attractive fiscal incentives, 0% corporate tax. We're looking at 0% personal income tax, amongst other taxes, including VAT and customs duties. And as I mentioned earlier, the objective of setting up this special economic zone concept within Port City is really to ensure that seamless investment facilitation. So other issues, other factors that come into play are your visas. So we are looking at a preferential visa system. We're looking at no restrictions on foreign currency. So some of the other restrictive forex practices will be eased within Port City. And of course, investment protection, investor protection, which is a big area of concern. I mean, we are now aggressively going out to market internationally. And what we almost always hear from investors and businesses is their concern with investor protection. So we have what is called inbuilt investor protection mechanisms. I won't go into too much detail, but I'll just give you sort of a quick summary of some of these mechanisms. So when you come on board as an authorized person, a person or an entity authorized to do business within Port City, your agreement will have certain inbuilt mechanisms which ensure that your investment is protected. So, for example, the challenge of retrospective legislation. We are all familiar with retrospective legislation. Investors have suffered at the hands of retrospective legislation. So here, your AP agreement with the Commission will state that the terms of your agreement will not be altered by subsequent policies or changes of government or regimes. Once something is afforded to a business or an entity, it's more or less carved in stone. There's also what's called a stabilization clause, where in the event some sort of regulation or policy causes a loss or some sort of detriment to your business, the Commission has the authority to alter the terms of your agreement to ensure that you are adequately compensated. So those inbuilt mechanisms have been addressed and have been put into place by the Special Economic Zone law for investors and businesses. And of course, the equilibrium clause or the stabilization clause that I mentioned earlier is also here. Right. So in terms of our offering, as I mentioned earlier, the Port City offering, in terms of operating costs, Colombo and Port City in particular is significantly lower than some of our competitor cities, such as Singapore and Dubai. So in terms of operating costs, we're looking at almost a fifth of Singapore and almost a fourth of the operating costs of Dubai, which really gives us a fairly significant competitive edge. In terms of cost of living, again, significantly lower compared to Singapore and Dubai. And in terms of the offering, in terms of living, we are not looking at, average standards of living. We are looking at, central business district living. So, for example, if you look at central business district, we're looking at, where the Shangri-La is located, where the One Golf Face is located. We're looking at similar standards of living. So as I mentioned earlier, Port City will be home to best-in-class living and residential facilities. We're looking at luxury condominium spaces, luxury villa facilities coming up. And all that put together, we are still able to offer significantly lower costs in terms of living through the Port City Colombo development. Here gives you sort of an idea of what the operational cost would be to kind of run an IT service center. So compared to some of the more popular destinations such as Hyderabad or one of your tier 2 Indian cities, as you would see here, Port City Colombo again is significantly lower. And this is why, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of potential for the ITES sectors in particular to look at setting up at Port City, of course, availing yourself of the other benefits of the Special Economic Zone, which is to bring in your capital, repatriate your profits, pay your employees. But in addition to all that, a significant savings for a standard 1,000-seater operation here in the heart of Colombo. And keep in mind that it's just not the operational aspects, but the livability aspect of Colombo. I mean, Indians, for example, are huge fans of Colombo, and I'm sure, given the chance, hands down, anyone would pick living in Colombo over some of our friends in the region. And as I mentioned, Colombo in terms of pollution, healthcare, safety, quality of air, security, ranks significantly higher, and more so at Port City. So we are looking at bringing in some of those real luxurious elements to living. So pristine beaches, we're looking at a 1.8 kilometer beach stretch. I'm sure some of you who have visited Port City would see, we have the breakwater, and this side of the breakwater, we have this, 1.8 kilometer stretch of swimmable lagoon type of beach. We're looking at Central Park facilities. So over 90 hectares are dedicated to green spaces within Port City. And we're looking at really, making Port City a very sort of livable, sustainable, eco-friendly living experience. We have been very mindful of that in the master planning of the city as well. Very quickly, to give you an idea of the master plan of the city, this is what the city is going to look like. You would see the color coding of this master plan that gives you an idea of the different users. So the point to note here is the fact that the land users are already predetermined, means that you're not going to have ad hoc construction coming up. So it doesn't mean that an investor who purchases a plot of land is at liberty to put up whatever he or she wishes to put up there. It has been all predetermined in what we call the development control regulations, thereby ensuring that we have very systematic planning and ensuring that the whole planned city concept with ESG at the core comes out very strongly. Just a point to note here, if you see the red plots of land depicted here in the master plan, the red plots depict the commercial users, the orange plots depict the mixed development users. So if you notice here, the red plots are more sort of inclined towards the central business district, with the off-white plots, which are the residential plots, more open to sea, which really ensures that those looking to live are not going to wake up in the morning to skyscrapers or anything like that. We've been very mindful in the development stage, where the office operations, the financial center operations are more inclined towards the central business district. Again, as I mentioned before, ESG, sustainability, very much at the core of what we've done. 3 rounds of environmental impact assessments, multiple rounds of consultancies with government agencies to ensure that the development is compliant with the findings and the requirements of these EIAs. Sharp focus on sustainability, as I mentioned. We're looking to be 100% renewable energy powered. That is the end goal for Port City. We're looking at efficient use of water resources, sustainable, LEED certified building construction, and of course, wastewater management. This very quickly gives you an idea of some of the key developments which will be coming up at Port City over the next 4 to 5 years. So the Colombo International Financial City will be breaking ground later this year. CIFC will be home to 3 towers, the vertical development of Port City. As I mentioned earlier, we will be breaking ground on the Villa project, and then some of the marina developments, which are also to take off later on this year. There's a huge focus on medical tourism. We are bringing on board internationally renowned brands, which I believe we are permitted to announce early next year. So the objective here is really to open up a new segment of tourism for Sri Lanka. So Colombo in particular has not been famous for too many room nights. So we believe that this medical tourism segment, as well as the retail tourism segment, by virtue of the duty-free that is going to be set up at Port City, will open a new segment of tourism, which will, of course, give rise to more room nights within Colombo, a real much-needed boost for tourism here in Colombo. Those of you who are Sri Lankan, no need to tell you about the connectivity. So Port City, the elevated expressway will exit at the north ingress of Port City, which means anything between 25 to 30 minutes to BIA, and of course connecting you to the rest of Sri Lanka. So in terms of connectivity, we are very well positioned at the heart of the central business district. And of course, our beautiful motherland, by virtue of the connectivity, we are nothing more than 4 to 5 hours away from our world-renowned wildlife. Our beaches are some of the best in the world, 2 hours to Galle, 2 hours to Veligama, 3 hours tops to Tangol. And then, of course, the hill country, 5 to 4 hours. And we have a completely different offering. And then, of course, the cultural triangle. And this is what, this is the message that we really want to send out, that we don't have to leave our much loved island, our much sought after island that has been home, the place we've called home for many, many years. All those opportunities that we would otherwise go after, the greener pastures that we would look for, will now be at your doorstep by virtue of the Port City development. Thank you. So that brings me to the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Radika. Amazing, and absolute. Nice to hear so much of beautiful things about Sri Lanka. So many questions coming in. I'll take one by one. Radika, the first question is coming from, I think it's Arun, and he says, please advise on how to get more details on the 100% foreign ownership with no restrictions in capital profit repatriation.
Okay, so that's very simple. I will leave my contact details on the chat, or Rohantha has my details. Please do get in touch with us. So I represent the project company, as I mentioned, CHEC Port City, or if you visit the website of the Economic Commission, you can get in touch with the Commission, and all that information is freely available. I'm more than happy to share the marketing material with you and take up any questions that you have regarding Port City.
Radika, another very nice question coming up. She says, let me just read out the exact question, the very words. Law graduate from the University of London, and called to the bar of the Supreme Court, and a very pretty personality. What made you venture out to the commercial world?
Okay, so this has nothing to do with Port City, right? But happy to share my experience. But let me tell you very quickly. So at the point of deciding on what I wanted to do in terms of my undergraduate, I was pretty much fixated on the legal field. So I was told by my friends and my family that my personality was very conducive to pursue a legal discipline, at which point I decided to kind of take on a law degree. Having done my law degree and having qualified as an attorney at law as well, I had a brief stint in the legal profession. So I interned in a couple of law firms. I served in a couple of legal roles. And I decided that the practice of law was really not for me. And having had the opportunity to work in the private sector, I found that business development was more my passion. And over time, I realized that my legal discipline was not in vain. My legal discipline really enhanced my skills, and my business development aspect of work was really sort of further boosted by my legal background. And that was really the start of my search for what I would call sort of niche positions. So it's very difficult to, at the outset, go to an interview and say, I'm a law graduate, I'm an attorney at law, by the way, I'm also a qualified, a CIM qualified, it's challenging. But you would see as you go along that as you venture into the commercial sphere of things, your legal qualifications and that discipline that you acquire over the years as a result of your training is really never in vain. And that is how I really came to be where I am.
Shalindri from DFCC Bank is asking, any particular reason why you decided to work in the public sector? And given that you would have done a fantastic career in the private sector, from what we hear and the manner in which you present yourself, any thoughts?
So I think you really move where opportunity presents itself, right? And my roles over the years have really been stepping stones. From the early days as an apprentice to my next role as an analyst, a research officer. It was just one stepping stone after the other. And I would think that when you establish yourself in a certain manner, of course, developing the skills that you're best at, that is the kind of brand that you build for yourself. And then you subsequently become known for that. And then once you have put in a certain number of years, you're headhunted, you're approached by certain entities. And then it's really what works for you. There is no sort of prefabricated model to say this is exactly what you're going to be in. If you qualified as an LLB, a graduate in law, you're going to be a lawyer. Or if you're CIMA qualified, you're going to be an accountant. It doesn't always work that way. So it really depends on where you are in life, what works for you. And just, I think at the end of the day, just being able to be very passionate about what you do. Because where your passion lies, I think that's where your success is.
But Isurinda, who is actually studying from Oman, Radika, the question is, we've seen a former Prime Minister of UK promoting the port city, and in our mind, I think it was a very good idea that it's been done, because Sri Lanka needs that kind of elevation for us to build Sri Lanka properly. Given that you are a Chartered Institute of Marketing graduate, how beneficial is this kinds of endorsement?
Extremely beneficial. I'll tell you why. Because that viewpoint from a neutral personality, particularly a personality such as David Cameron, who we all know, who played a fairly significant role, during that kind of controversial time in the UK, and then who went on later on in his career also, to make a significant impact in the areas of trade and investment. Hearing his perspectives on the potential of an island such as Sri Lanka really adds a new perspective to what we are offering, as opposed to us having to go out there into the global markets and having to sell the port city proposition. It really adds a lot of value to our efforts when you have personalities like him who come out, who have watched Sri Lanka over the years, over the challenging times, and who see the potential that Sri Lanka and the port city development in particular, what it has to offer.
Mr. Patirana is asking a question. Do we have the power to convince the international diaspora to invest in the port city? And what are the challenges you face in marketing port city?
I certainly hope we have the power, because the Sri Lankan diaspora will be crucial in making the port city project a success. Just last week, I was in Singapore, and we participated in a forum which was interestingly titled "Invest in Sri Lanka, Retire in Sri Lanka." And the Retire in Sri Lanka segment, for the very first time, opened up an opportunity for us to reach out to the diaspora to offer the living and residential facilities at Port City. And we really hope that, developments such as Port City will give an opportunity for the diaspora to come back. It'll open up different avenues in terms of bringing back even their earnings, even in terms of employment opportunities for those who wish to, continue working in Sri Lanka. So ample opportunities. And we really hope the diaspora is going to be a huge segment operating out of Port City. That is the plan.
I mean, you're right, Radika, because I work for Reckitt and for Lever, and every time when a Indian comes and works in Sri Lanka, and we give a farewell after his 3-year stint, the last words he says is, "I'm going to retire back in Sri Lanka." So it's right, and there are a lot of people actually now who have lived in the US for 20, 25 years sometimes, and they're coming back to Sri Lanka and they're retiring because they get their allowances and the gratuity from the places where they've worked, and I suppose it's a fantastic positioning. There's a question coming from Sachini, and she's saying, "This is the first good news that we have heard about Sri Lanka, and from what you have said, we believe you. My question is, how is it to work as a woman in a man's world?"
Who said it's a man's world, Sachini? No, fair question. I've had my fair share of challenges, more so as a mother of 2 boys. It continues to be challenging, and that is why, in addition to all of these offerings that we talk about in terms of trade and investment, in addition to all that, I'm also a huge advocate for creating more conducive conditions for women, and not just conducive conditions, but really creating that platform for women to reach their full potential. you know. We talk about regulations and quotas and all of that, all those are well and good. You need those. But day to day, functioning day to day, I think employers and employees of the opposite sex really need to come together to create a more conducive environment. And in cultures such as ours, in particular, you see the burden of bringing up children, running the household. You see that burden falling unequally on the woman. To me, I mean, that those are the things. Those are the real challenges for women. I mean, for example, you take if you take a board meeting or a meeting, any meeting in a company that runs, say, after 5 or after 6, out of the man or woman, who out of the two is going to be struggling more to sit through that meeting? I mean, I know for one, the moment I pass 5:30, I'm thinking, what's for dinner? What are the children going to eat? What time are they going to get to bed? There's homework to be done. What's needed for school? You see what I mean? Those are some of the practical challenges, right, of a woman operating in well, if you want to call it a man's world, or in a working woman. So that is the culture. I think an all-embracing culture is what is really going to help us to reach our full potential.
There's Kalani. She worked at Dialogue and now she's based in UAE. She works for a large telecom company over there, and she's asking, how do we make sure that there is consistency of policy when the government keeps changing their policies so often? And we saw this yesterday happening at the cricket board.
So, Kalani, as I mentioned earlier in our presentation, that is where the investor protection mechanisms kick in. And that has been addressed by the Port City Special Economic Zone law. So just very quickly, just to recap, I mentioned that there are certain inbuilt mechanisms for those who come on board Port City. So for example, your agreement with the Economic Commission will state that no subsequent regime or no subsequent policy or regulation can alter the terms that have been afforded to you. So for example, if you have qualified for 20 years tax incentive, a subsequent regulation or policy or regime cannot come and reverse that and tell you you're now done. So those are the inbuilt investor mechanisms that we have at Port City.
Kishani, she works for a medical company, one of the top medical companies in Sri Lanka, but she doesn't want to mention her name. She's saying, Radika, where do you go from now? You've been a marketer, you've been into policy from AmCham, sitting in global boards, and then, of course, now you're sitting in driving virtually brand Sri Lanka at a global level through Port City. Where do you go now?
Wow, what a question. I often think of that myself. Well, I'll tell you where I would like to be. Nowhere else other than Sri Lanka. The thought has crossed my mind. I've lived overseas. I've studied overseas. I made a conscious decision to come back to Sri Lanka. And my only hope is that not just for myself, but I mean, this esteemed audience that I'm addressing today, that Sri Lanka will afford ample opportunities for us to really, for those of us who think what next, that there will be sort of a plethora of offerings that we can really seize, offerings that will help us to reach our potential for the kind of messed up careers like myself, which are a combination of legal and policy and marketing. I'm sure that once we bring in the global brands, once we bring in the big investments into Sri Lanka, that there'll be plenty of opportunities to accommodate all of us. And for those of us who want to really remain in Sri Lanka, nothing better.
Samira from Halis is asking a question, Radika. It says, what plans do we have to attract the world's wealthiest individuals to a place like Port City instead of them choosing other world-class destinations like the Maldives or Singapore?
So many things, Samira. Like I mentioned, the livability factor, right? You have Dubai and Singapore. In terms of cost, we are a lot more cost competitive. And as I mentioned, we are one of the most livable cities compared to Singapore, India, and Dubai. Secondly, our talent pool. Those of you guys, you're going to be the talent pool that we feed into Port City, and y'all are going to be the offering, and y'all are going to be what attracts these global brands into Sri Lanka. As you are aware, we have over a 90% literacy rate. A majority of our population speaks English. We have an output of over 9,000 STEM graduates per year. We are ranked number 2 globally for graduates coming out of SEMA. I think, Rohanta, if you maybe you are aware of this, we have one of the highest turnouts of CIMA and UK certified accountants globally. We have over 35,000 plus graduates coming out of our universities. So that's a significant talent pool that can be tapped into. And that really is the offering. As I mentioned, connectivity. We sit at the epicenter of some of the main flight, trading, maritime routes. No better place in terms of convenience. Our FTA arrangements. No other country in the region has FTA arrangements with both India and Pakistan. We are in talks to come on board RCEP, which is going to be one of the largest regional arrangements. So a lot of potential. Once those arrangements fall into place, we're going to be kind of a consolidated market. So those are the USPs for Sri Lanka and Port City in particular.
I think one last question. See, I mean, we have had about 130 odd CEOs, chairmen, ambassadors, speaking on this forum to the undergraduates. We have about, I think, 500 students studying for the master's program who will be watching you in the next 2 days. Some are maybe traveling, maybe some might different other functions. But very few speakers has the kinds of credentials of yours where you have gone to a traditional university system. And everybody says it's fantastic. Sri Lanka is beautiful, but they go and study abroad. But in your case, you have gone to Colombo University and studied in Colombo University. You have got into the system in terms of saying, I want to come and serve the Bar Council. And then, of course, you have served private sector, and now you're serving public sector, which is very unique.
Small correction, Rohanti, if I can stop you there for a second. My undergrad was in the UK. However, I qualified as an attorney at law under the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka. So my undergrad was in the UK, but I came back to Sri Lanka.
So the point, what I'm saying is that you've got a very good grounding of education in Sri Lanka, Radika, and then of course you have worked in the private and the public sector whilst also serving global organizations like AmCham and stuff like that. So what is your advice to a youngster in the current context where, things are very rough, inflation is very high, even after earning 400, 500,000 rupees, when you get your tax at 35% and you have your MSPA, CPF, when you pay, you find it tough to live. How would you, what is your advice to a youngster today, Radika, at a personal level?
I mean, as you mentioned, Rohanta, we are really at crossroads in terms of what the future holds. But what I would say is stay the course. There are shortcuts that are now presented, even in terms of educational qualifications, in terms of work experience. It's a money-making business, right? So you have all these different shortcuts to reaching the end goal. But I would say stay the course. In terms of your educational qualifications, don't find the shortcuts. Because it's not just the qualification that gets slammed on your CV. There is a certain amount of training and discipline that your thinking process undergoes, at the different stages of qualification. And at the end of the day, when you present yourself for a job opportunity, I find that in this day and age, employers go beyond your CV. It's your soft skills. It's your soft skills. It's what thinking you can bring to the table. It's your critical thinking process. All of these things get trained at the various stages of qualification. Having said that, it's also finding out what you're passionate about. If there's no passion in what you do, however fat your paycheck might be, at the end of the day, it's going to burn you out. So it's about finding that right combination, what ticks for you, and finding a role that really helps you to bring out the best in you, that a role that helps you to be the best version of yourself. In terms of prospects, I am unable to promise you what Sri Lanka has to offer, but I can vouch for what Port City has to offer. And that is why I believe in the project. That is why I'm able to speak on the project, because I know the thinking that has gone into this. It is more than a infrastructure development project. It's more than the master planning aspect of it. The thinking that has gone into the development of this special economic zone has really been, the strategy has been put together to bring in some of the best global brands. And we need the support of not just the international community, but we need complete buy-in from Sri Lankans as well to make this project a success. And when it is a success, you will find that all these opportunities that you would otherwise go in search of will now be at your doorstep. And Port City Colombo, as I always mention, is really for the next generation of Sri Lanka. We are putting together the groundwork, but the actual benefits will be reaped by the next generation of Sri Lankans, that talent pool that is really second to none in the region.
Thank you so much, Radika. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic having you on today's program. It's lovely to have people like you who are saying we are going to serve Sri Lanka. And of course, those who come and say that we actually believe in a project of this nature. And, a lot of people have a rhetoric of saying they would like to criticize people's work and the government, but very few are prepared to put their head on that railway track and say, I'm going to do it. And it's thank you so much for coming on board, talking to the youngsters of tomorrow, explaining a very complex project like Port City in such a short span of time. And I think what really struck me was your ability of giving your view to the youngsters, unbiased. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Radika Obeyesekere, Director Investment Promotions and Marketing of the CHEC Port City, Colombo. Ruth, over to you.
I think Doctor has said it all, but I will also go out and say, Ms. Radhika, thank you so much for coming onto our platform, sharing your insights. I'm sure, irrespective of gender, you would have inspired all the participants on the platform right now, and anyone who'll be, viewing your presentation in future as well. So that, and as well all the information you have shared with us on the project. So once again, thank you so much. And before we wrap up, just a quick reminder to all our industry partners that have it. We have a strong internship program for all our faculties. So if you do have any openings in your companies, do send it our way. And with this, I'd like to thank all our students who've joined into the session, all our well-wishers, and anyone on our Zoom platform as well as our Facebook platform. And also thank you so much to our IT team for the technical support extended during this session. So with this, I would like to thank one and all for joining in. Until we meet at yet another MBA Diary session, take care.